Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we will be learning today Amir Hashem Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph. Now, today's share is going to be a bit of an abbreviated share because, in all honesty, at this late date, I'm stumped by something in Sif Tes. So rather than begin Sif Tes, which starts at the bottom of the Tes Amud Aleph, and have to stop or say something that I'm not 100% comfortable with, I'm going to stop before Sif Tes and try to straighten this out and figure it out before tomorrow's shir. So we pick up today on the Tes Amud Aleph top line in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Kuf Samach Beis of Ches. Of course, we're continuing to learn Hilchos Tetilas Yadayim. Today's shir should be a schus for Shalema for Meir ben Chayesara. And it should also stand as a schus for Achedu Kol Beis Yisrael, B'chol Makom Shehem, everyone who is in danger, those who have their boots on the ground, B'makom Sakana. The Rebbeinu Shalom should Hinei Lo Yanav V'Lo Yishan Shemei Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over every member of Klal Yisrael, B'chol Makom Shehem. Says the Mechaber, Siv Ches, Natal Yadai Achas. If somebody washed Mayim Rishonim on one hand, so he did a pour of Mayim Rishonim, and we're speaking about a case where he used less than a revius. So he poured less than a revius of Mayim Rishonim on one hand. So now that hand, the tumah came off that hand, but the Mayim Rishonim that remain on the hand are tummy. So Natal Yadai Achas, V'shivshifa Beroshoi. And then what he does is, he takes his wet hand and he rubs it on his head. Okay, why is he doing this? Says the Ramah in the parentheses here, Pirish, Kidei L'Nagva. He doesn't have a towel to dry his hands from the Tilas Yadayim. And unlike some others, he has a full head of hair. So what he wants to do is, he wants to pour Mayim Rishonim on his hand, and then he wants to dry his hand by wiping his hand on his hair. Pirish, Kidei L'Nagva. Ulafikach loy nitma yadai. Now, the Ramah is just explaining to you over here, normally, we're always concerned, if somebody scratches his head, he needs to wash his hands. Why? Because the scalp is considered to be a makom zeya, that's a place that is full of perspiration and other dirt, soil. So therefore, normally, at any point during the day, somebody scratches his head, he has to wash his hands before he learns, before he says a bracha, etc., etc. So the Ramah is telling you over here that's not the case. The person did not scratch his head. If the person scratched his head, he would have to wash over again. But that's not what this fellow did. All he did was he took his hand and he's wiping his hand on his hair in an attempt to dry his hand. Okay, let's just read this again. Natal Yadai Achas, he washed one hand, V'shivshafa Beroshoi, and then he wiped it on his head. Pirish Kidei L'Nagva, he did this in an attempt to dry his hand. Ulafikach loy nitma yadai, and therefore, his hand did not become tamei from scratching his head. Masha'en came in Siman Kuf Samach Dal Sif Beis. This is unlike what we're going to discuss in Siman Kuf Samach Dal Sif Beis. Shechikech Beroshoi, where somebody scratched his head, where then that alone requires him to wash again. Or maybe this person washed Mayim Rishonim on one hand, and then he went to the wall, and he wiped his hand on the wall. And after he did this, Chazar v'naga ba'oisa mayim. Now he goes with his hand, and he touches that water, Shebo miyadai, that came off his hand, ala roish v'ala kaisel, on his head or on the wall, tameya, his hand becomes tamei again. So basically what happened here is like this. Fellow went ahead, he washed Mayim Rishonim with less than a revius on his right hand. Now there's tamei Mayim Rishonim on his right hand. Now, we've already mentioned many times that even though we have a little bit of a stira over here, we have a hand that's tahar, and it's covered with Mayim Rishonim that are tamei. But that Mayim Rishonim that's tamei is not re-metame the hand. the hand is not makabel tumah from the mayim rishonim that are on it that took the tumah off the hand. Okay, so we have a tahar hand covered with tamei mayim rishonim. Then the fellow goes like this. He wipes his head. Now, by wiping his head, he has now deposited some of that tamei mayim rishonim on his head. Okay, fine. Now he goes ahead with the hand that he just washed, and he touches his head again. You know what he did now? Now he went and he touched that mayim rishonim that was tamei, that he put on his head, he touched it again. Now his hand becomes tamei. Okay. Let's see what the Mechaber says over here. Sha'oisa mayim tameim, because that tamei mayim rishonim chazru v'tibu es hayad shenoga behem. It now could be rimatami the hand. Af agav the kol kama deloy shif shef mitarim b'shif shof. The Mechaber notes a very interesting theory here. He says it's a fascinating thing. As long as the mayim rishonim are on the hand, as you poured the mayim rishonim on the hand, so long as that mayim rishonim remains on the hand, it's not rimatami the hand. Not only that, but really, there's a way that you could wipe the water off your hand and avoid having to wash mayim shneim. In other words, if what the guy would do is he would take his hand and wipe his hand on his head until he dries off all the mayim rishonim off his hand, guess what? His hand would be tahar, and he wouldn't even have to wash mayim shneim. What's the whole point of mayim shneim? The point of mayim shneim is we have tamei mayim rishonim on the hand. We pour mayim shneim to be matar the mayim rishonim. But if you wipe all of the mayim rishonim off your hand, then there's no mayim rishonim that you need to be matar. So says the Mechaber, it's a fascinating thing. You pour the mayim rishonim on your hand, the mayim rishonim is tamei, but it's not matami the hand. You go and you wipe. As long as you're wiping, you're not matami the hand. Matter of fact, if you keep on wiping until you dry the hand, then the hand is tar, and you don't even need mayim shneim. But if you remove your hand, but if you remove your hand from what you're wiping it on, and then you go ahead and you touch the mayim rishonim again, now it's matami the hands. And that's what the Mechaber says here. Af agav the kol kama deloy shif shef mitarim b'shif shuf. Even though you really, what you could do is you could wipe the mayim rishonim off your hands, and you could even avoid having to wash mayim shneim, and the mayim rishonim are not rimatami your hands. Hashta de chazar v'noga. Now that you took your hand away and then you touched it again, gara, that makes it worse. Kvarnis bar, and the Mechaber finishes off the sif by saying, and we've already explained numerous times, sha'ashayfech revius ka'achas ein b'chlal kalelu. If you would have washed with more than a revius, the whole thing wouldn't be negeya to ein shamayim t'meim klal. Because if you wash with more than a revius, there's no tumah, there's no tamei mayim rishon. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cutting on Zayin. Noto yodei achas. Says the Mishnah Berurah, afaresh klal inyan shel sif zeh. Let me explain to you the rule that governs this sif. And really, what the Mishnah Berurah is about to say now is really going to be a repeat of so many things that we've repeated so many times over the last several days. So the Mishnah Berurah says, Hine, Mevurah le'el b'sif beis, we explained earlier in sif beis, ta'anoitel yodav, when somebody washes the tilas yadayim, tzarech lishpaich mayim rishonim mishneim, you need both mayim rishonim and mayim shneim. Harishonim mitarim hayadayim. The mayim rishonim take the tumah off the hands and the mitar the hands. V'heim atzman tameim. But the mayim rishonim themselves that remain on the hands are tamei. Vashniim, and then you pour the mayim shniim, mitarim my son. The mayim shniim are mitar the mayim rishonim. V'rak b'shafach revius babasachas hayadav. But if you pour a revius or more on the hand in one shot, ein tzarich l'shniim l'rayva paiskim. Then most paiskim say you don't even need mayim shniim, because when you pour more than a revius, the tumah goes puff, the tumah vanishes. There's no more tumah here. So really, me'ikar adin, according to Rav Paiskim, you don't need mayim shniim. If you take a look at Dirshu footnote number 42, he'll remind you of what we learned earlier, that Lamaisa, we say that you do need mayim shniim, even if you wash it one of the revius. Because of Kana Mechaber, continues the Mishnah Berurah, what the Mechaber is writing over here is as follows. Dim notal rak mayim rishonim levad. Let's say you only washed mayim rishonim. Ubepachos berevius, and you used less than a revius. Tahamayim temeimhem. So now the remnants of the mayim rishonim that are on your hands are tamei. In kinach, if you wipe the mayim rishonim off, nitaru yadav, your hands will be tahar. Af b'loy mayim shneim. You don't even really need mayim shneim. If you pour only mayim rishonim on your hands, so the mayim rishonim took the tumah off your hands. Now the problem is you have tamei mayim rishonim on your hands. Okay, wipe it off. If you could wipe it off, you don't even need mayim shneim really. Because the mayim rishonim alone made your hands tar. You don't need mayim shneim to make your hands tar. You need mayim shneim to be mitar the mayim rishonim. But if you could remove the mayim rishonim from your hands by wiping it off, gesundheit. Varak, however, only im chazar v'naga b'mea kinuach. But if you're attempting to wipe the mayim rishonim off your hands, and then you go back and you touch the mayim rishonim that you removed from your hands, and you touch it again, so in our case, you had tamei mayim rishonim on your hand, you wiped it off onto your head, then you took your hand away. Now you go ahead and you touch it again. Now you're being matame your hand all over again. V'rakim chazav anaga b'mei kinuach nitmu yadav mehen. V'ayin b'bir halacha shebi'arnu d'hainu b'ti'eved. Bir halacha says that this is that the idea of wiping the mayim rishonim off your hands is only b'di'eved. Aval l'chatchila tzarich l'shtiyim dafka. L'chatchila we always want mayim shniyim. Ayz kat nun ches b'roishoi. This person tried to dry off his head by wiping it on his head. He was wiping it on the hair on his head. We know that if you really touch your scalp and you touch it a makam zeya, then you need a nunitil yadayim. Shani hacha, but over here it's different. This person isn't scratching between his hair down to his scalp. He's only wiping his hands on the surface of the hair. Like the Ramah said in the parentheses. If he goes back and touches the mayim rishonim again, he becomes tamei. His hands become tamei. Again, he reminds us, we're talking about where you only washed mayim rishonim, so there's still tamei mayim rishonim on the hands, and you washed with less than a revius. And that's why the water on the hand is tamei. The wording of the Mechaber is a little bit difficult. The wording of the Mechaber is Af al gav the kol kama deloy shifshef mitarim b'shifshuf. The way you teach that is, even though, as long as the person didn't take his hand away and then be shifshef, right? In other words, look at how the Mechaber opened the sif. He said, "Notol yadei achas v'shifshesh v'baroishay." He washed one hand and then he wiped it, right? And then then he went back and he touched it again. Over here, what the Mechaber is saying is, as long as he didn't remove his hand and then touch it again, that's the shifshef. Mitarim b'shifshuf. Really, it would have been an option to wipe the mayim rishonim off his hands and be mitar his hands that way. See, that's what the Mishnah Berurah says here. Let's cut and sabach. Mitarim B'shivshuf, Ritzayin and Loimar. What the Mechaber wants to say is, if this person wouldn't have taken his hand away and then gone and touched the water again, he could have completed his Netilas Yadayim with the Shivshuf. Theoretically, he could have poured Mayim Rishayim on his hands and then completed the Netilas Yadayim by wiping his hand on his head until his hand is dry from the Mayim Rishayim, then take his hand off. Now his hands are Torah and he doesn't even need Mayim Shneim. The problem is that he did this. He did that, took his hand away, and then put his hand back. That's where his problem is. But now that he goes back and he touches his hands, he makes it worse. Now he has to dry his hands, and it's a do-over. He's got to wash the Netilas again, like we've explained earlier. So the takeaway really from this sif, again, the Mayim Rishayim, when you wash Mayim Rishayim, you have Mayim Rishayim that are tamei on your hands. Those Mayim cannot be rimatame, the yad, that they took the tumah off of. It's a one-way street. When you pour Mayim Rishayim on the hand, the tumah comes off the hand and it goes into the Mayim Rishayim. But it cannot go back from the Mayim Rishayim into the same hand. So as long as the Mayim Rishayim remain on the hand, it's safe, meaning that it can't be rimatame the hand. But you have a problem. You have Tamei Mayim Rishayim on your hand. So you wash Mayim Shneim to take it off, to be matar the Mayim Rishayim. What this guy wants to do is he wants to remove the Tamei Mayim Rishayim from his hands. Instead of being matar the Mayim Rishayim with Mayim Shneim, he wants to remove the Tamei Mayim Rishayim. How's he going to remove it? By wiping it on his hair. Okay, says the Mechaber Tenetza. You could do that. You could wipe it off on your hair. How? Just keep wiping. But if you take your hand off and then you touch it back, now what you did is the Mayim Harishayim that were tumbling on your hands came off your hands. It went onto your hair. Once it came off your hand and it went somewhere else, if it came off your hand and it went on your hair, or it came off your hand and went onto the wall, now it could be rimatama your hand. So as long as it was on your hand, it couldn't be rimatama your hand. You deposited it on the wall. If you keep wiping and you just deposit it on the wall and take your hand away, you're okay. But if you deposit it on the wall, take your hand away and touch it again, then it could be rimatama your hand. Then you need to dry your hands and start all over again. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schos of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua's refuahs parnassah shidduchim to all those in need. And we should be zeicher to see the BS Girl Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.